So hello, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning from wherever you are joining us in the world. Thank you so much for subscribing and joining us to this Nextatlas webinar called the Z Factor. We will today talk about Generation Z and how brands should connect with them. So I'm Mario Coletti, Managing Director of Nextatlas in the UK, and together today with me we have Debora. Debora, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Debora, and I'm a trend researcher and data analyst at Nextatlas.
Thanks, Debora. So today we will talk about the findings of Nextatlas about Generation Z, particularly the trends that are relevant for them and the trends that are also relevant for the brands that are aiming to target these generations. But before we go into the details of the findings from Nextatlas, I would like to make a short introduction of who we are and how Nextatlas work. Nextatlas is a fast-growing MarTech startup. We have developed specific artificial intelligence technologies that enable us to analyze billions of social media data, both visual and verbal, from multiple different social media platforms such as Pinterest, Instagram, Twitter, Behance, YouTube, Reddit. And for our Russian audience and Chinese audience, we also analyze VKontakte and Sina Weibo. We have a specific technology that identified amongst the social media world what we call innovators and early adopters. And we have created a specific panel of over 300,000 industry-specific innovators that give us, through their posts, the ideas and the views about what are the emerging trends. We analyze more than 2.5 million posts per week and over 600,000 tags. And out of all the data that we can collect through social media, we develop insights that are useful for our clients, for their brand innovation and marketing strategies. The key benefits of using Nextatlas is multiple. One of the main benefits is about the fact that everything we do is actually supported by data through our AI technology, and therefore is actually checkable and verifiable. The other aspect is that everything we do is industry specific. So we can go down to the details of the specific categories, industries, and markets according to the needs of our clients. And last but not least, the other big benefit is about the fact that our platform is always on. So everything we say and communicate or suggest can actually be tracked and checked over time to see what are the key changes that are happening according to what we predicted and how things will move in the future. So this is us, this is our Nextatlas, and through this technology, we have and we constantly extract trends, insights, and everything you will see today is actually coming out of Nextatlas as a platform. Let me then start introducing today's journey. Today, we will talk very briefly about some key trends that were already under our radar about 6 or 12 months ago. And that we predict through Nextatlas that will continue to be very important as behavioral trends for Generation Z. Then we will go into the outlook, and we will talk about new trends and new aspects of Generation Z that probably were slightly unexpected and emerged in the recent past and are going to be very relevant for the brands and the way they will develop their strategies. And finally, we will talk about insights to action, what brands need to do now in order to be relevant and communicate to consumers. We will also have a final part of the presentation, which is to speak with you and to answer your questions. So please add your questions in the notes, in the messages. We will check the messages, we will check your questions and answer as much as we can during today's webinar. And for those that we will not be able to answer, we will come back to you separately. Everything that we are going to say today is recorded and also will be available as a report. We have actually condensed everything in today's presentation in the 45 minutes that we will present, but actually the report is significantly more extensive. So let's now go into the known. aspects and facts related to Generation Z that we were already quite familiar with, seen through the Nextatlas telescope. Things that we think will be very relevant also in the future, despite we were quite familiar with. And we have identified 4 key traits that are going to be very important and very relevant in the future. And probably you have seen these before, but under different lens rather than the Nextatlas one. The first one is related to realness. Realness is about the relationship that Generation Z have with themselves, but also more importantly with their peers and with their similar. And realness is a key trend that is extremely relevant both in the beauty and care industry and also in the food industry, and is related to the relationship toward their peers, which is significantly more toward the attention to diversity, body positivity, inclusiveness, and imperfection. This trend is predicted to grow over 32% in the next 6 months. The second trend is related to the relationship that the generation has with society and with the environment. We are seeing that the choices that Generation Z are making are becoming more and more related to their activism, to their interest toward social justice, to their connection with communities, and to the fact that everything they do is actually driven by a significantly higher responsibility to the impact that this have to the environment and to the society. This behavior and this trend is going to continue to grow in the next 6 months and continue to be relevant and very important for the brands to consider. The third aspect is the relationship that Generation Z has with brands. And more we have seen that Gen Z are becoming skeptical and very critical about brands, and only are open to have an entertain relationship with brands that show the real authenticity, that can be trusted by them, and are able to communicate with narratives which are relevant and resonate to the Generation Z communities. And this brand skepticism and attention is also going to grow significantly continue to grow in the next 6 months, over 29%. And finally, the last element is the relationship that they have with themselves and their sexuality. This is extremely important in the way Generation Z consider themselves and portray themselves to the life. And therefore, the way they dress, the way they use makeup, the way they consume things, and so on and so forth. And therefore, this is a trend which is going to be extremely important for the fashion industry, but also for many industries related that is targeting Generation Z. So these 4 traits were probably quite considered already in the recent past, but as it continues, continue to grow and will continue to grow in the future, and therefore will be things that will need to be taken in consideration. But there are things new things that emerged and came out as new, which we probably did not expect, and that the pandemic and the various things that have happened in the last 6 to 12 months have actually influenced in terms of the behaviors and in terms of the style of life that the Generation Z are going to have. And there are 4 traits that we have identified here. Two of them will be explained by Barbara more in detail, but I want to give you an overview of these 4 key traits that are extremely important, are going to be extremely relevant for brands. The first one is into the wild, which is a tendency to escapism by Generation Z. They have shown a significant interest, increased interest toward outdoors, towards way to find escape from the stress of the limitations of the pandemic, and ways to creative ways to spend their free time traveling, but also approaching holidays in a creative and diverse way versus the past. The other trend and the other trait is related to the relationship versus the future and their career, which we call creative entrepreneurship. And is related to the way they see the future, they see themselves and the skills and the way they want to monetize everything that they've learned and will learn in the future. The third trait is related to the relationship to shopping. We are expecting that traditional life shopping will go back to life and will become very, very relevant and important. Everyone is craving to go back to shopping. However, shopping will never be like it was before. And what we will see is that the relationship that Generation Z will have toward commerce and the way they shop will be combining the mix of virtual and physical, online, mixed reality, and also hyper local choices. And all these need to be considered when we think about retailing and think about the way the traditional brick and mortars will need to evolve in the future. And finally, last but not least, Climatarian Life is the trait that is highlighting the way that Generation Z will want to live their life, consume, and have an impact toward the environment. And this aspect is very much related to the choices that Generation Z will make in terms of the food consumption, but also related to everything that is important and is impacting their body, their health, as well as the environment. But more about this now from Barbara. So I would like to hand over to you, Barbara, and talk about a couple of these trends. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Mario, and the overview of GenZers main traits. So for this webinar, I'll walk you through a couple of those 4 traits that Mario just mentioned. The first focus being on this creative entrepreneurship aspect. So the creative entrepreneurship trait is related to a macro trend called profitable passion, which we've been monitoring for a while now on the Nextatlas platform. So over the years, we've seen a rise of creators emerging across the internet, young creative minds who are passion-driven and skillful, and who are constantly trying to improve those skills. So it's a trend that addresses to the so-called passion economy, where individuals find different ways to monetize their skills, especially through online labor marketplaces. So recently we've seen platforms that enable people to turn their passions into livelihoods, such as Skillshare, Substack, and Patreon, gain more and more relevance. This trend concerns different industries, with advertising and branding at its top, followed by creative sectors, as well as technology. When we look at the main emerging tags related to this trend, we see writers, creators, makers, designers. So it's really a trend that encompasses all different sorts of professions and services that are marketed in specific platforms, such as Skillshare, as I just mentioned, but also in well-known social media channels as TikTok. So when we look at the trends timeline, we see that it clearly gained a boost with the pandemic crisis, and that its forecast is very positive for the next 6 months. So the second trait we'll have a closer look at today is the Climatarian Life of GenZers. From the many aspects of their eco-conscious lifestyle, we'll be talking about a trend called from trash to table, that specifically concerns the food and beverage industry. It's a trend related to the rise of interest in upcycling practices, in repurposing and reusing materials and in ingredients. So we have reduce, reuse, recycle, and all these keywords that are connected to this sustainability-driven lifestyle. The emergence of this trend is a phenomenon boosted by the overall growing awareness regarding food waste and overconsumption. So it's really one of the many aspects of Gen Zers' eco-conscious lifestyle, because in reality, it's a phenomenon that goes beyond the food and beverage industry, and it reaches other industries as well. We've seen a lot of signs on the fashion industry, for example, where practices that aim at designing our waste keep on growing in relevance. When we look at the data behind the trend, we can extract some more specific insights. So the focus on diets and ingredients, for instance, show a large interest in plant-based products as well as in pastries. We see scraps, leftovers, ugly, and imperfect. They're all very interesting tags that commonly appear on online conversations revolving around this trend. So these tags reveal a growing interest in converting ingredients that would normally have been discarded into edible food products. So looking at its timeline, we see that it's a trend that has been steadily growing over the years, reaching unparalleled levels over the last year.
Thanks, Barbara. That was really insightful. And just as a reminder, more and more data are available on the report and out of the Nextatlas platform. But we wanted to give you a very quick overview of those two key trends that were almost unexpected, but are becoming extremely important for the Gen Z and for the brands. Now we're going to the last section, which is about insights to action. And here we will talk and give you some ideas about what brands need to do to address the Generation Z expectations for the future. And we would like to do that introducing an element which is extremely relevant in terms of the way brands should actually address the Generation Z. We have noticed through the way Generation Z talk about brands that there has been a significant power shift from the relationship between brands and consumer, which we have summarized on the fact that in the past, brands were powerful and consumers were grateful for their existence. However, today, particularly with Generation Z, the shift of power has actually moved from brands to consumer. And today, consumers are powerful and brands should be grateful for consumer choices. This is going to be a paradigm shift in the way brands should address consumers in the various ways, from communication to their positioning to the way they generate experiences for the generations. And now I would like to hand over again to Barbara, which will take us through 5 key insights to actions and case studies that will make all this concept alive.
So Gen Zers are unforgiving. This first insight to action resonates a lot with the value of brand awareness that Mario talked about earlier. So let's not forget that Gen Zers are digital natives and they know how to use technology at their advantage. So they will probably question even the slightest sign of incoherency or misleading information. Here, what we wanted to stress is that there's an importance of building trust with them and how that trust can actually be gained once companies and brands actually show a willingness for transparency and honesty. Well, before exploring some data supporting this insight, we wanted to briefly explain the percentages that you'll be seeing a lot throughout the different insights to action today. So these percentages express the growth in the volume of mentions of the specific tag on social media channels. At times, they will show a prediction for the next 6 months. At other times, they'll present the growth of mentions of over the past 18 months, so that you have a nice balance of what has recently happened and what is predicted to happen based on our AI-driven platform. So here, for instance, we see words such as transparency that is predicted to grow 13% in the next 6 months, while verifiable showed a dramatic growth of 127% over the last 18 months. The use of the word trust among Gen Zers is also very interesting data because it shows how this insight actually concerns all sorts of industries, from advertising, branding, all the way to beauty, health, and packaging. So in a very practical way, this first insight to action could be translated into into brand narratives that embrace more authenticity, transparency, coherence, always trying to keep in mind how Gen Zers are extremely resourceful to verify empty promises or questionable narratives. So we've selected different case studies to illustrate the insights to action. So to start, we'll be talking about the new Starbucks traceability tool that was launched last year in the US. This new digital tool transforms each bag of beans into a sort of digital passport, offering consumers information about farmers, roasters, and baristas. So more than simply providing a packaging that states the coffee beans provenance, they are actually providing a way for consumers to get to know exactly from where and who was involved in the coffee making process. Such tool and initiatives can really increase a brand's reputation and improve its score with customers. But it's really important to highlight the need to stick to the truth, because obviously if the information presented is vague or even questionable, it can end up becoming counterproductive and even trigger negative perceptions. Another very interesting case study is the recycling system called Loop that H&M announced last year for its customers in Stockholm, Sweden. Customers were offered the possibility to transform unwanted garments into new fashion items. The interesting take here is that people could actually see in front of their eyes the machines using a technique that disassembles and then assembles old garments into new ones without using water or other additives. So more than just saying, yeah, this product was made out of recycled items, H&M is actually showing customers that that is actually true. Our second insight section today is empower teenpreneurs. So we know that Gen Zers are vocal and they're not afraid to speak out. In fact, they are constantly showing this interest in trying to change the status quo. And earlier today, we talked about their creative entrepreneurship trait. So once we understand this willingness to make a difference in the world and we connect it with their creative side, there is a really sweet spot where brands can act. So we've seen earlier how Gen Zers are embracing their creative sides, passions, and trying to actually monetize their skills, right? In fact, the word creativity among Gen Z users has seen a growth of 31% over the past year and a half, while mentions of upskilling grew 62% in the same period. Self-expression is extremely important for Gen Zers, and it's something that really all of them talk about, no matter what their interests are, be it in beauty, in fashion, or even in food. The insight here for businesses is that brands and companies could be actors who not only provide opportunities for them to express themselves, but actually empower them and provide them the needed support to foster this creative and disruptive minds. For this second insight to action, we've chosen Chipotle's first ever Super Bowl ad as a study case. So the storyline basically revolves around this little boy who imagines what if a burrito could change the world. And it's a very interesting example that illustrates this mix of imaginative and creative side of youngsters with the demand for change, especially when it comes to issues related to sustainability and ethical production. Well, let's have a look at it.
What if this could change the world? A burrito. Yeah. You're so weird. It could. It could change how we plant things, water things, grow things, pick things, move things, and transportation things. What? That's not a thing. It could make our farmers happier, more organic, more real, more soil healthy, less carbon emitting, and world changing. Hey, are you still talking?
So for those who may not be familiar with Depop, it's a Gen Z beloved online marketplace. And the company opened experiential flagships as community hubs, content studios, and marketing vehicles. So its first brick and mortar store opened in LA, and it functions not only as a venue where customers are invited to experience the product, but that also it functions as a creative gathering space. It's a store that serves as a shop, a studio for hire, and a pop-up space. So basically, those who are trying to sell their products can go there, use the space to take pictures, and maybe learn how to play with photo lighting and how to market better their products and so on. So it's a very good example of how a company expanded from its core service, in this case, a reselling online app, and started to offer in real life experiences that foster this entrepreneur and creative side of young generations. So for our next insight to action, we wanted to talk about a bit more about brand identities and the importance of embracing fluid approaches. Well, first of all, it's important to know that Gen Zers' attention span is pretty short. So for them, everything is fast-paced. They will open their phones, they'll scroll, click, close, and move to the other content in a matter of just a few minutes. So they really want new things. They want fresh takes at all times. Dynamism and fluidity here are two key fundamental qualities. So for businesses, this need could be translated in a constant work of brand identity, which is an approach that can keep up with this ever-changing Gen Z consumer. So brands should be really constantly trying to spot current trends and keep an eye on their favorite channels, right? So they should not only keep up with what's trending, but also be on top of what's happening so that they can provide relevant and unexpected takes on their products and services. And a way of achieving that is by adopting a more flexible approach to brand identity. So we've identified that rebranding and flexibility are predicted to grow in usage in about 15 and 13% respectively. And it's true that brand identity fluidity can be translated in a more multifaceted approaching advertising and branding, which is something that appeals a lot to younger generations, especially female consumers. It's really all about marketing and communication strategies that are not based on one single frozen static language or narrative, but more about strategies built around a system that has several facets that can change and mutate over time according to emerging macro and micro trends. Luxury brand Gucci's altered logo type is a very good example of how an established business can embrace dynamism in their brand identity. So over the years, Gucci has shown great ability in retaining its cultural relevance among younger consumers. And one of its winning strategies is the capability to leave behind fossilized single languages. So over time, they've embraced multiple logos and graphics that sometimes even feel almost unrecognizable and very distant to their traditional brand identity, but that shows a sort of fluidity and change that really appeals to younger generations. Karma Kitchen is a commercial catering space startup based in the UK that has recently launched a new brand identity and marketing push that highlights the core values of community, creativity, and collaboration. It playfully conveys the idea of a vibrant commercial kitchen in the form of stylized drawings of equipment. So instead of building their marketing strategy around one single language and logo, they mashed up different elements, photographs, and drawings to give a more inspiring, fun, and dynamic take to commercial kitchens. Our next insight to action is push the boundaries. So playing with the unexpected is an extremely important way to grab young consumers' attention. Gen Zers are really interested in what stands out, something that feels fresh, innovative, interesting, and new. So expanding the boundaries and exploring other territories is a way for businesses to stand out in the market. And a way to do so is really to just push the boundaries, to offer exciting collaborations, maybe with other players within the same industry, or even offer crossovers with other industries and sectors, and even to embrace technological innovations. So mentions of unexpected on online posts is expected to grow 25% in the next 6 months, while words such as partnerships and reinventing have seen an interesting growth of 25 and 22% respectively over the last 18 months. We see how this can be a winning strategy when targeting Gen Zers by looking at words such as collabs that is mostly posted by Gen Z experimenters. Here, our data is showing the growing importance for brands and companies to explore different partnerships, collaborations, maybe launch capsule collections, limited editions, and even embrace innovative solutions in order to give a brand new take to their products and services. So many of you may think, what do a makeup brand and a chain of fast casual restaurants have in common, right? But in fact, Elf Cosmetics and Chipotle are two companies that are doing great on TikTok, and they're attracting a lot of Gen Zers' attention. And they have recently teamed up and launched an eyeshadow palette featuring shades inspired by iconic Chipotle ingredients. And each palette purchase comes with an offer for free chips and guacamole at Chipotle. So these collaborations are really noteworthy because they appeal to Gen Zers by combining different interests in one single product or service. And in reality, these intersections between food and other industries, well, in this case, beauty, have increasingly emerged in the market over the last years. The other case study that resonates a lot with this insight to action is Nourished. So Nourished is a nutrition company aiming to introduce the concept of a more personalized medicines and supplements into people's daily lives. It's the first product in the market to offer such a highly personalized nutritional solution. So it's interesting because here we have a good example of a product that is found in the intersection of different industries. So we see here tech innovation, visually pleasing design made out of 3D printing techniques that are all concentrated in this health-focused edible product. Maybe we can check out their promotional video and understand better their product.
So, do you want to upgrade your vitamin game? Nourished is a 3D printed personalized gummy, full of high-impact vitamins and nutrients. As you can see, there are 7 different layers in each stack, each comprising of different vitamins and nutrients tailored just to you. Your Nourished stacks are made fresh to order, which means we can guarantee 99.5% of the indicated dose is present when you take them. What's more, they're vegan, sugar-free, and delivered in plastic-free home compostable packaging. And that's why we're the UK's highest rated vitamin. Are you ready to personalise your own? Then head to our website, get-nourished.com.
So finally, our last insight to action today is live shopping reinvented. At first, hyperlocal and mixed reality may seem very distant concepts, but actually converging those two elements is really the needed step for a more effective marketing and retail strategy. Well, both can actually go very well together. On one hand, you can have a very hyperlocal retail service, and on the other hand, a digital infused shopping experience and marketing strategy. So words belonging to the digital world, such as virtual and immersive, have been growing impressively over the last 18 months. The tag immersive presented a growth of 23%, while virtual showed a dramatic growth of 614% of mentions on social media channels. Next to this, we also have identified more mentions of hashtags, such as hashtag #ShopLocal, which has grown over 60% in the last year and a half. The data is showing us how these two worlds are growing side by side, because it's true that consumers keep on wanting virtual experiences, but they are also growing more and more interested in this idea of local services that can offer a sense of community and belonging. So merging these two ideas is something that really can sparkle the interest of younger generations who show significant interest in eco-conscious practices and new experiences. A good example of this mix between hyperlocal and mixed reality is Mac's Innovation Lab concept store that opened its doors last year in New York City. So here clients are offered the opportunity to customize their own palettes, to personalize product packaging, and even to virtually try on makeup shades or even entire looks. But even with all these different digital experiences, each in-store experience is very much based on community and a feeling of a hyper-local branding, because in the end, those are not services that are offered outside the physical store, only there. So everything is powered by digital tools, yet the connection with the brick and mortar store remains untouched, creating a very interesting balance between local offering and virtual reality. Finally, the last case study we'll be presenting today is the Uffizi Gallery's TikTok strategy. So last spring, the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, Italy, closed its doors like all the other museums due to the pandemic crisis. And so the museum really jumped into social media trends, adding TikTok to its new network of social media channels as an attempt to attract the young art fans. And they really did great, posting a series of short videos that show a mixture of great masterpieces and wacky humor. Turns out the strategy worked well. So according to the museum's director, young visitors had nearly doubled when it reopened in the last summer. So here again, we see a good example of this encounter between a hyper-local offering and a digital-driven marketing strategy.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Debora. That was such a great and fascinating story and journey that you took us through. And now I would like you to take some time to think about the Q&As, the questions that you have. Take a few seconds to write down the questions to the panel so that we can answer them. And to give you the time to think about what are your questions, I would like to take you through a quick review of what we have seen. As you have seen, everything is coming together. We started talking about the now. We started to talk about the today and known trends and known aspects that we knew already, but we have actually seen growing and we will expect growing in the future. They are related to the relationship that GenZ have with themselves, with their generation, their peers, with the social environment and society, as well as the relationship with brands. We also have gone through key new trends and aspects that we did think were unexpected and emerged during the last year. and those are related to their life and to their consciousness, related to what they consume, to their health and wellness, their need of escaping, as well as a new need of shopping. And this drove us to the key insights and the stories that Debora told us, fascinating stories related to ways that brand can actually bring alive and create a real relationship and be trusted by Generation Z. But to do that, they need to remember a number of aspects. One is that Generation Z are really unforgiving, and therefore, whatever brands need to do need to be credible, genuine, authentic, and credible by the Generation Z. If brands want to really be grateful to the powerful consumers that are Gen Z, they need to empower them and give opportunities to Generation Z to express themselves and become the teenpreneurs that will drive the future of the economy. And give them opportunities also to work with brands and be creative and to bring value to the society. Brands need to think about how to push beyond the boundaries and finding new ways to engage and create experiences that are fully immersive for the consumers. And they need to think about how they portray themselves. And Debora explained us about the concept of fluid brand identities, which is really innovative and different from traditional way to portray the brand and the values always consistently for decades and generations. And finally, we have seen the big opportunities that are ahead of us in terms of a new way of shopping. And the thing that we will move beyond the traditional online shopping or the current online shopping, which we have been forced into due to the limitations and the pandemic. We are all expecting to go back into live shopping, but live shopping is not going to be anymore like it was before. It will need to be the combination between solutions such as hyperlocal and solutions such as that use technology and the mixed realities. So lots to do and a lot of opportunities for brands, for agencies, for all of us to work and make sense and be engaged with Generation Z. And everything obviously need to be checked and monitored. And this is what we will do through Nextatlas and through the data. We will keep tracking and monitoring what is happening and checking how these kind of things are unfolding and evolving and moving to the future. So thanks again for joining us today, and thanks for following through the whole presentation. I think we have a lot of questions to answer, so I would like to double check a number of them, and we'll try to answer as many as possible. Just let me give me a second to get into the chat and the Q&A and see what the questions are. So I have a question here for Catherine, which is about the source of our data and how reliable and credible are these sources and basically statistically relevant. Thanks, Catherine, for asking this. It is a very critical question and one of those that we are very proud of. Basically, we have developed a technology which is based on algorithms which can identify those innovators and early adopters that are either generators of new conversation or are starting up and engaging with new conversation. By doing that, accessing several different social media platforms such as Instagram and Twitter and more of them, we are able to identify what we call the weak signals related to new trends and new behaviors. And these are helping us to identify and define what are the trends or predict what the trend will be in the future. And this is the way we work. We constantly analyze a dynamic panel of these innovators and early adopters, approximately over 300,000 of them around the world, from different social media networks. And we constantly check how these conversations are evolving in order to bring fresh data and fresh insights to you constantly through the platform and through our reports. And I think there are more questions that are probably more for Debora. So Debora, would you mind to?
Yeah, thank you. There's some questions related to the content. So there's an interesting one. How do you see the life cycle of these insights to action? So I think the person, thank you, John. I think it's about if they can be applied to long-term strategies. So all the data that we presented today, as I mentioned previously, they show very positive forecasts for the next 6 months, which is our safest bet. It's the most accurate prediction that we can extract from our AI-driven technology. But the important thing here, maybe we should highlight, is that we identify those insights to action based on core values and main traits of Gen Zers. So we can safely say that they are strategies that could be adopted for with a longer time frame. So let's say that the selection is more built around generational characteristics rather than trends or hypes. Do we have time for another?
Yeah. I think we have time, and there are a couple of questions. There's a question for you from Sella. Debora, do you want me to read it to you?
Which one?
Yeah, it's a question on the chat. Let me read it to you.
Yeah,
Hello, Debora. This is from Sella. Firstly, it was an interesting and insightful presentation. My question is, do you think there is a hypocrisy among Generation Z consumers, and more specifically, that their beliefs do not translate into their buying behaviors? I did a similar research, and this is one of my main findings.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, it's a question that resonates to one of the traits that Mario talked about, authenticity. We were talking about honesty and transparency. You're talking about hypocrisy. Well, yeah, there's a way to look at it. They, as a main trait, they are aiming at that. That's what they value. Now, it's very important to understand that value, and it's a way that businesses and brands should be pointing at that. So companies should be looking at and trying to embrace strategies that kind of try to communicate those values.
Yeah, I think, and Debora, I would say that there is always an element of truth and difference between what people think, what people share in social media, and what people actually do. The beauty of using the data that we have is actually the fact that the volume of the data is actually cutting the tail and the hat and the head, and therefore is actually bringing alive what is the majority saying. And usually when people are not actually sharing really or doing really what they say, then this is usually something that becomes very singular and very individual rather than for the group. But there is an element of trust and belief that need to be considered and carefully monitored, and we have tools to monitor it through the words and the veridicity of the words as well as the images that are published. And Debora, I think you had another question.
Yeah, it's a very different question, a bit very different from what we've talked about, which I think it's interesting, but it's about NFTs that had gained a lot of attention in the media and their relationship with Gen Z. And I find this very interesting because I was reading about this, but well, NFT, basically for those who are not so familiar with, it stands for non-fungible tokens. And we can actually make a very clear connection with our webinar today. I would say that as consumers, Gen Zers are digital natives. So let's say that they are very receptive to the idea of a digital token. And for brands, that it's a very interesting point because NFTs concern different industries that are very appealing to Gen Zers. So now I'm thinking about gaming, media entertainment, art, but also fashion. So if I think about fashion, for example, it could be a very good push for companies who want to launch digital garments in areas where ownership, scarcity, and authenticity matter a lot. So on the top of my head, I'm thinking about sneakers, for example. So these tokens can be very interesting in those territories.
I think we could go along and talk forever about this topic because it's so interesting and has so many different ramifications and facets that there are many, many angles and aspects that we could take in consideration. Unfortunately, the tyranny of time limits our opportunity to do that. But I want to actually cover a final question. This is from Nitin. Thanks for joining us, Nitin, today. Your question is about whether Nextatlas platform can ingest Google Trends data and merge the Google Trend with this one. And I can tell you that we have done many experiments about looking at our trends and the Google Trends, and we can say that they very much overlap. Some clients have actually asked to really match our trends with the Google trend and look at the differences. And we were actually impressed by the fact that our curves and our lines, the one that Debora presented earlier on, were very much aligned and very much showing the same directions. But there is a big difference. There are two big differences between the Google Trends and ours. That our lines and our trends start much earlier, and therefore it is we identify those that we were mentioning as weak signals, and then we carry on analyzing those weak signals until they grow and they become mainstream. And so it's roughly at the time when a trend shift from being a signal to being a mainstream that we start overlapping with the Google Trends lines, and they go along and they are actually trackable. So we do not include Google Trends in Nextatlas in our platform simply because we are so happy that our lines are totally coherent and aligned, and therefore we don't think there is the need of really matching those, but we can actually do it on demand whenever is required. So thanks again for the question. I think this is all for today. As I said, the tyranny of time. We need to move on. But it has been a great experience working with you, Debora, and putting together all this for our audience. As I said, the report will be available again for all the attendants, and we will be available for any question in the future. And I know that there are more questions that may come, which are maybe related to Generation Z, but also to other topics. And we are always happy to answer those questions. We can answer questions about how Nextatlas can be helpful for brand strategy, what are the macro drivers that can be relevant for the brand. We can answer questions related to the trends in the market, specifically related to a specific local market as well. We can answer questions related to competitor analysis and M&A, as well as target audiences and how the target audiences are changing and shaping for the future. All these questions can be answered by connecting with us directly. So here are our emails and telephone numbers. Please get in touch, reach out to us, and we will be happy to engage and discuss everything that we presented today and any other question that you may have. So from my side, thank you so much. Take care and be safe and keep following Nextatlas. Debora, last few words from you.
Thank you so much. Every question you have, you can write to us. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much to all of you. Bye-bye. Oh, there may be another question.